Welcome to the Tackling College Sports Podcast, the definitive resource to help you navigate your way to play college-level sports. Here are your hosts, Chris Legates and Mark Franco, where they want you, the TCS Nation, to be your best.
Welcome, TCS Nation, and thanks for tuning into the Tackling College Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Franco, and alongside me is my co-host. If you're feeling brave, go ahead and tell him Simon and Garfunkel, the best duo in history. Chris Legates.
Daryl Hall and John Oates. That's all I got to say.
Good morning, Chris. What a lovely one it is. Always loved Flag Day.
Oh, yeah. Happy Flag Day to everybody out there.
Hey, Chris. So today on the show, we have John Wallin, men's head coach of cross country and track and field at a place we're both pretty familiar with, Southern Connecticut State University. Good morning, John, and welcome.
Thank you very much, guys. How you doing?
Doing well.
Doing great.
Hey, John, let's jump right in here. Can you take our listeners back to when you graduated from Southern Connecticut State University in '99 and walk us through your career to your current position, of course, as I just mentioned, a head men's coach of cross country and track and field?
Yeah, sure, no problem. When I graduated back in '99, to be honest with you, I had no idea what I was going to do. I really didn't have any plans, and I didn't have any options. Like a lot of college guys, I didn't create a plan, and I didn't spend much time thinking about it. And then I graduated, and I was like, well, what do I do now? My father, who was the head coach at Dartmouth College, asked if I wanted to be his graduate assistant, even though I wasn't going to take any graduate classes. It was more like a part-time position. They paid me a very small amount of money. And I said, yeah, sure, it sounds good to me. I really didn't want to get away from athletics. I knew that I wanted to be involved with athletics, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And so when the opportunity, came for me to work with my father, I thought that'd be a great idea. And so I spent 3 years with him at Dartmouth College as his assistant, which was absolutely fantastic because I really got to see the inner workings of a Division I, Ivy League, track and field team. I also spent time as their assistant strength conditioning coach with Jay Butler, who was a head strength coach at the time. So I got to spend a lot of time working with football, basketball, hockey, and lacrosse at Dartmouth as well. After 3 years, I decided it was probably best for me to go out on my own. I don't know if it was that or getting kicked out of the house, one or the other.
We'll go with you wanted to go on your own.
Right. So I wanted to move out on my own. That was really my opportunity. So I got a job out at Adams State College, which is in Alamosa, Colorado, as an assistant coach. And what was great about that job is there were only two coaches there, myself and the head coach. And the head coach did all the distance running events, and I was able to coach every single event that wasn't distance oriented. So all the sprints, all the jumps, relays, the hurdles, the multis, and all the throwing events.
Wow.
Which it is a lot. But when you're really young and you're motivated, give it to me. Right. The more food, the better. Let me get strong off all this work. So it was a fantastic opportunity for me to learn how to organize a practice when you have multiple things going on at the same time. And then of course Damon Martin, the head coach, was a fantastic mentor to me as well, and he helped me in a lot of ways. So I spent 8 years there, eventually moving up to an associate head coaching position at Adams State, and then in the summer of 2009, my wife had an opportunity to get a job out east, so I followed her obviously out east, and was able to pick up an assistant job here at Southern, which was basically part-time pay. And then at the end of the year, the head coach that was currently at Southern decided to follow his wife to another job, and so the vacancy opened here at the head coach at Southern, and I was able to pick up the job here, which was fortunate.
And the lesson is always follow your wife where they go.
Exactly.
Clearly. Happy
life, happy wife, and vice versa.
Absolutely. I was just going to say the same thing. If my wife's not happy, then we're in trouble. So
John, you've clearly have had some quite a bit of success over the career. Can you, however, tell us some of the toughest challenges as it relates to your career?
Being at three different institutions, between obviously Dartmouth College being Division I and Ivy League, and then having, being at Adams State, which is a fully funded Division II program, and then coming to Southern Connecticut, which is not even close to a fully funded Division II program. the major issue I see, or the challenges that I've faced since being at Southern, have been mostly financial. When I was at Dartmouth College, the biggest challenge was finding the right fit for your Ivy League school. They obviously had to have the grades, and they had to be pretty good athletes, but they also had to fit the mold of that particular institution. Like Dartmouth College is much different than, say, Harvard. Harvard is much different than, say, Princeton.
Right.
So each job, had its own difficulties recruiting specific kids to that program. Whereas at Adams State, you could kind of recruit anybody and they'd fit in at Adams State. Southern Connecticut is very blue collar, so it's a little different. And then just the finances and dealing with financial aid and the lack thereof, those are major challenges, that I've faced year in, year out at different institutions. Dartmouth College being Ivy League, they don't give out scholarship money, so every kid has to find some sort of financial aid. Now, granted, the financial aid institutions, like, at an Ivy League school, they really do a good job, and they make sure everybody's okay. When I was at Adams State, it was fully funded, so we really didn't have any issues financially, which was great.
Yeah.
So,
well, Chris, go ahead.
John, in a sport like track and field, and we'll split them up into separate because they are, but when you're recruiting, and obviously time is based, a lot of what you're recruiting is going to be about. You're going to see someone run an event and look at their times. But what else are you looking for when you're looking at a recruit for track and field events? Is it technically based? Is it form? Do you look in your crystal ball and see, we can improve this person by 0.3 of a second, or we can improve them by 5 feet when you're looking at a recruit? What is it that goes into your recruiting process?
Well, I would tell you, there's a lot that goes into recruiting, and it's a lot more than just times, we'll say, or even technique. Because we're so performance-based, that's what kind of initially gets you to look at somebody, right? So you're looking through results, and you're like, oh, well, this kid is a junior, or this kid, goes to a certain school that's maybe a small school. So you look at their times, and that's what initially piques your interest, right? And then from that point on, we have to really, really investigate the kid a lot. And I think that's part of the reason why we've been able to have success over the last couple of years at Southern is we really have to take a look into the character of the student athlete. We look a lot at personality. We look a lot at their attitude, their body language. We try to watch from afar. We watch them at competitions. You got to look and see how much competitive fire they have. Are they a kid that, like, as soon as it doesn't go well, do they hang their head down and slump their shoulders? Is their body language negative? Or is their attitude positive? Do they, if they foul a throw or a jump, do they get fired up for the next one and bring it just as hard, if not harder? And find a way to get on the board. How competitive are they? Are they really doing this sport for the right reasons so that when they go to college, you can really kind of cultivate that competitive fire and really get them to have success? Or is it something where, like, they're doing it because their mom and dad really want them to do it and they need to get a scholarship to go to college? What are their reasons? What's their motivation? What is really driving this particular athlete to have any success? So we look at a lot of different things. When we bring them in on campus, I want to meet the parents. I want to talk to the father and the mother and find out how, what their thoughts are with stuff. When you meet the kid one-on-one, is he, or she a happy kid? Are they a confident kid? Are they arrogant for the right reasons or arrogant for the wrong reasons?
Right.
Like things like that. It's some of our best athletes. I've gone to competitions and watched them talk a lot of trash, but then back it up. And that's kind of something I really look for. Like, can a kid, like, be a little aggressive verbally? Can a kid be a little competitive, like, and talk about it, but then go out there and show the fire? Or are they someone that, like I said, when a kid doesn't do well, do they start to feel sorry for themselves? Mm-hmm. That's an instant, like, oh boy, this kid is not going to be cut out for college athletics. So that's a lot of what we look for when we recruit, and it's extremely important, because when you get to college, it's 365 days a year, right, that you need to kind of be invested with your sport. And there's downtime to these sports, but, like, for the most part, you kind of have to be invested in the long haul, and you have to do this for the right reasons. And if you're doing it because mom and dad want you to do it, then you're not going to have that much success.
Right. And you talk about body language, John, and you talk about character. How important would you say is coachability, and how much do you spend time talking to coaches of a prospective student athlete?
Well, that's another aspect, is the coachability, and the trainability. Is the kid, are they receptive to suggestion? And I think a lot of times we've had high school coaches say so-and-so is not very receptive to coaching, and then we get them on campus and we find out that they just didn't trust the high school coach,
Sure.
And so a lot of times it depends on my relationship with the student athlete. If I can get, in their head the right way and get them to buy into what we're doing, then every kid becomes coachable, and that's a lot of it, and it's hard because nobody wants to admit, like, damn, I can't coach this kid because they don't trust me. That's a really tough thing for a coach to admit to themselves. But the reality, at least as far as we've found, is if we can get a kid to trust in what we're doing and get them to buy in, then they really have a lot of success and they become very coachable. And that doesn't happen all the time.
Right. And I would think you've had a great deal of success doing that, John. You've had over 60 All-Americans, a national champion. So I think it's working pretty well for you.
Well, I think as a coach, sometimes you look at you hardly ever look at the successes. More you look at like the times that it didn't work out, and you look back and you reflect back on like, why didn't it work out? Mm-hmm. And I think, so when people talk about the successes you had, sometimes you forget about it because you spend too much time, or not too much time, just a significant amount of time looking at the areas that fell through and you didn't come through on. Which are sometimes a lot less noticeable. People don't notice like all the times that you didn't come through, or that, the things didn't work out the way you wanted. Especially in our sport, they don't notice it because we don't have as many wins and losses as other sports.
Right.
Like in soccer, it's like if you, say you're 10-5, it's pretty obvious how your season went, based on wins and losses. Whereas like, there's no win, it's like, it's not as cut and dry. In track and field, I mean, you can win the New England championships and everyone's like, wow, you had a great season, but it's like the 5 or 6 kids that didn't produce at the end of the season that you thought, they didn't produce the results you thought they would, that as a coach, you look back and you're like, damn, I really need to go back and reevaluate what we did and where we went wrong. So,
yeah, I think some of the hardest criticisms we've given ourselves in a team sport, which is obviously vastly different than an individual sport, John, is we could win a soccer game and I'm driving home and I have an hour ride. I know the players are happy about that we won, and they're probably not even thinking about it. I'm thinking about all the mistakes we made in the game. I'm thinking about all the individual performances that didn't go well, and you're trying
to
you're thinking about how you can correct that. Absolutely.
Man. Yeah, those bus rides home, even after a great victory, can be brutal because there were certain aspects that you thought would go one way and they just didn't. And it still kind of like boggles your mind, like what happened there?
Right.
We may have come away with a victory, but it wasn't as pretty as I thought it would be.
Right.
We prepared better than this.
John, our podcast is geared towards that high school student athlete that wants to continue their athletic career at whatever they think the next level may be. What do you think are some of the common denominators that you believe all college athletes need to have, regardless of the level that they may compete at?
Well, I'll tell you, the level of commitment goes up significantly when you go from high school to college, and I think that's something that not only does the student athletes need to be prepared for, but the parents of the student athletes need to be prepared for as well. And I think, generally speaking, in this country, I think social media doesn't do a very good job, or, we'll say like even ESPN or the news, of showing how hard professional athletes work in the off season. I think when people, like when the season's over for the NFL, they think they just do nothing.
Right.
When in reality, like your top athletes are maybe working out 2 or 3 times a day, 7 days a week until they go back, and are ready for practice. And so when you get college athletes, the NCAA has a lot of limits on what we can do, but, kids will still go out and work out on their own. And I think that's the biggest thing is the kids that don't work out in the off season don't work out during the season. Like they don't, they end up not really having the great success with the, with the team that they thought they would. You have to work so much harder in college. College athletics is a collection of the best athletes from whatever high school you were from, right? So if you're the best kid in your team, the best soccer player in your team, or the best basketball player in your team, You're now going to college where it's a collection of the best kids from their teams. So talent is, is widely spread through college. It really comes down to who's going to be working the hardest and who's going to be, spending the most time focusing in on what needs to change in their lives to be successful. And I think that's the biggest challenge that most high school kids face when they want to go to the next level, is that level of commitment. It's physical, emotional, mental. You have to be really into it, and you have to understand what it takes to be able to really compete at the collegiate level.
I'll tell you what, John, I've always been very impressed with your program since I've been at Southern, and I can remember one day walking from the garage into the field house, snow on the ground, probably 20 degrees, and your field athletes are out there working with the coaching staff. And I thought that was awesome, man. And it's no surprise that they've been successful.
Well, and I think that goes back to saying, you got to get your kids to buy into what you're doing, and we've had good success, across the board over the last, a long time. And it comes from getting kids to buy in. It's not that big of a deal to go outside and to throw, if there's snow on the ground. I mean, the kids will put plastic bags over their feet, inside their shoes, so their feet don't get wet. You wear enough clothing, you're going to be fine. If you convince kids, we go to the hill and we run the hills, even in the winter sometimes, if you convince kids that this is what we do to have success, if they really want to be good, they will do it. And they'll be excited to do it. It's all about buying in.
Does success breed success, John?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you have a senior class that has had great success, and you have the freshmen coming in and they see the excitement, and the work ethic and the discipline and the drive that maybe the upperclassmen have because they've had great success, it really does trickle down. Particularly with guys. Guys are fantastic followers. It's funny how the male brain works. And I'd say it works a lot differently than the female brain. When guys come in, they want discipline. They want to be led, and they want to follow. They really do. And so when you have a good group of upperclassmen that are really into it and they're fired up all the time, man, does that spark a fire in the young kids. They just eat it up. They eat it up.
Mark.
Hey, John, with many student athletes focusing on one sport these days, can you give us your take and even perhaps the program's take on the pros and cons of the multi-sport athlete?
Well, from our perspective, just from a track and field look at when we look at kids for recruiting, I would tell you the multi-sport athlete is the most sought after athlete from our perspective. We want a kid that doesn't specialize because a lot of times, how do I put this? Kids become one dimensional if they do a sport year round and they don't have any kind of variation in their training.
Sure.
They can get pretty one dimensional, and so with track and field, if a kid just runs year round and that's all they do, they lose a little bit of that athleticism. They lose a little, they become almost more prone to injury. And it's hard to understand, but we look for kids that do two different sports outside of the sport we're recruiting them for. So a track and field athlete, we're looking for a kid that maybe plays soccer, basketball, and does track and field in the spring. Or maybe a kid that, maybe plays football and hockey and, then does track and field in the spring.
Right.
We're looking for somebody that hasn't specialized yet. And part of that is it hasn't been abused, the sport hasn't been overused in their head, they haven't been burnt out with it, There have been a lot of kids that, that have just specialized in track and field and they never got burnt out and they never had any injuries and it worked great. But, we look for a lot of kids that do multi-sport, multi-number of sports. Like I said, basketball is a huge one. If a kid can play basketball at a pretty good level, make their starting varsity team and then still be successful in spring track, boy, they're usually going to be really, really good in college when they just do track and field.
Yeah, and I would imagine your sport, there's probably a lot of that, right? Because, there's not many kids that are doing track at 6, 7, 8 years old, like perhaps they are in t-ball, football, soccer, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate, especially in this area. I would say, in other parts of the country like Texas and, California, they have pretty strong youth programs. But in the Northeast area, there's not a ton. New York has a bunch. But yeah, it's pretty big deal. If a kid can figure it out in high school and have moderate success, they're usually going to have great success in college. And a lot of that, I'll say this too, like when we recruit, we also look for kids that look a little physically immature.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking for kids that are going to really start to develop in their early, to mid 20s. Like a kid that is already shaving and looks like a grown man at the age of 18 is not usually going to be that successful in college in a sport like track and field where performances really matter. Like maybe in a sport like baseball where it's highly skilled, like it's very, very skill oriented,
Mm-hmm.
They might be able to have great success in college. But in track and field, it's a little different. So
is it different too from the standpoint of, at least the track and field that I'm, my daughter is a track and field athlete as well. So just sort of being in that circle for a little bit of time, do you guys also take into consideration the fact, at least it appears to me, that, there's maybe just one coach or two coaches for the entire squad? And that,
right.
That you guys would have a pretty big impact potentially when that student athlete gets into college.
Yeah, no, that's a big part of it too. Like if a kid can have general success with, a very novice coach as their coach in high school, they're probably going to have great success in college, because a lot of high school programs will have like maybe it's your math teachers out coaching the distance runners, or maybe it's your science teachers out coaching the jumpers, and they had minimal experience with the sport to begin with. So they're doing the best they can. But a lot of times the success of the athlete comes from just their straight up athletic talent,
Sure.
And when you see a kid that's real raw, so you get, if you're a girl and you're long jumping, you jump 17 feet with the worst technique in the world. As a college coach, I'm looking at her like, oh my gosh, this girl could probably jump 20 feet in 3 or 4 years,
right,
with some technical work, some strength training, and just the natural progression from going from like 17 to like 21, 22,
Yeah. Excellent. Chris,
So
I'm sorry.
go ahead. No, that's okay.
Chris, go ahead.
John, how would you want a prospective student athlete to contact you or your staff, and what should they and shouldn't they do when it comes to contacting you?
I think email is a great way to contact, coaches. We have a lot of parents that call and ask questions, which isn't a bad thing. But email usually is a really good thing. And I'll tell you what's interesting about email is like some kids send you emails that they really thought about what they wanted to say.
Right.
And other kids just send you emails. It was like, oh my gosh, like what were you doing when you were writing this email? There's like no grammar. Like run-on sentences is like, you told me nothing. Like you didn't tell me what high school you're from. You didn't really tell me, like what events you do. So I always say if kids are going to contact a college coach, they should really sit down and think about what they want to say, and make sure you have your full name. Make sure you have your high school name. Make sure you talk about what events you compete in. Even putting down your high school coach's name and their number would be a great thing. But email is great. Email is a great way to get in contact with coaches because, it's very rare. Coaches don't spend a lot of time in the office. If you call a coach's office, you're going to more than likely have to leave a voice message. More than likely, they're not going to call you back.
Right. How about video, John? How important is video for you? Not just from the aspect of, okay, I see them competing, but obviously we talked about it a little bit before with technique or form. There must be a huge impact for video in the recruiting process for you.
Yeah, videos are good, because you can look at what they actually look like. You know what I mean? Like sometimes seeing things live, you miss a little bit, because it happens so quickly. But when you got a video, you can kind of slow it down and see some of the mistakes they're making. But again, going to watch a kid live is one of the biggest parts of our recruiting. Like we will go, if there's a kid that we really want, we will go watch them compete, probably more than once, just to see what they look like. And I think a lot of kids need to get back to that competitive feel. Like, and I wonder, this kind of goes back to the multi-sport thing. With kids, maybe playing baseball their whole lives, and they get to high school and they've played maybe 1,000 baseball games in their life. How important is this game to them? You know what I mean? Like, how important is winning or losing a game? You know what I mean? It's like, so how competitive are they really at this point? So those are things we really look at, which it's hard to tell on video with that stuff. But from a technical aspect, no question, video is great to watch. When you're watching a sprinter come out of the blocks, you can see, oh my gosh, the kid's got a long ways to go to be fast. Or you're like, well, that kid's actually doing a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you, I mean, you're speaking to two people here who speak about the desensitization of winning now, that, kids compete so much that they're desensitized to winning or losing. There's always a next game or a next event, and that drives me wild.
Yeah, no, I think that's a huge issue with a lot of kids. It's like, everything's okay. Like, if we're a very competitive program, and as coaches, we're highly competitive, and so we're very sensitive to like wins and losses, from the worst kid to the best kid. And I find a lot of kids come into college in a lot of different sports not as competitive as they should be, because it's okay. It's okay to be not competitive, like in a lot of programs, and it stresses me out, man. Holy cow!
It's okay. You'll still get a ribbon.
Yeah, everyone gets a trophy.
Right. Well, I think that's part of it. It's like, no matter how well you do, you're going to be congratulated for it.
Yeah.
And that was my point with, like, we were talking earlier about, like, preschool graduation, kindergarten graduation, third grade graduation. I mean, like, well, it's a big deal to graduate high school and then go on to college, and then graduate college and go on to the real world. So why are we congratulating kids for everything they do?
It waters it down. Yeah.
It really does. And I don't think it's a good thing. I think, kids need to know, like, hey, listen, you messed up. That wasn't so great. It's okay. Like, you're not a bad person for messing up, but we need to acknowledge this, and we need to make some changes so that next time we can put ourselves in a better position, and compete at a higher level. I just think, boy, oh boy, we went to my son plays soccer too, and they had a big party for all the soccer teams, and every kid got a medal.
Yeah.
And this is like, U10 soccer.
Right.
I'm like, holy moly, there was a team that didn't win a single game.
Yeah.
And every kid on that team got a medal. Yep. For what?
It's usually the same medal, too. It's the same medal as the winningest team, too.
It is. It is, And holy cow. Yeah. I don't know how to feel about that. I mean, actually, I do know exactly how I feel about it. I just don't know if it's socially acceptable to express it.
Right. I'll tell you what, John, I run a club soccer program, and there's a neighboring club around us that actually, this is the time of the year that you have tryouts for next year's programs, who have now changed the term of it to be evaluations and not tryouts.
Really?
Yeah. So now when you go, you're not saying, "Oh, I'm going to try out for the team." Now you're going to be evaluated to see if you make it to. So now we don't even use the term tryouts anymore, John. We're using evaluations.
I know.
That's because a tryout can mean that you don't make it.
Tryout means you get cut.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's tough because we're becoming so sensitive to everything that you can't do anything anymore without offending somebody. And there's a lot of things that, maybe in society we should be sensitive to that we're not. And there's a lot of things that we shouldn't be sensitive to that we are. And it's kind of a tough place right now, I think, especially for our youth, because I think they're confused on what should be important and what shouldn't be.
Yeah, we've said this over and over again, that in our minds it's sort of a disservice to the kids because, you're not hearing no enough, or you're not hearing you didn't really do well in this match, or try harder. And then when you get out of school and you graduate and you're working perhaps for someone, you're going to hear no. You're going to hear you didn't do a good job, and you're going to hear that maybe you're getting fired.
Right,
so
and that's
and then what does that young adult do when they haven't had the coping skills of dealing with hearing no?
You're 100% right. I mean, what happens? The cruel joke is when you leave high school, you leave college, you leave this like safety nest, and all of a sudden we kick you out into the fire, and most kids just burn up.
Yeah,
they can't handle the fact that like you need to be at work on time.
Right.
Like you need to pay your bills on time. You need to pay attention to certain things, respond to emails, all these different things that like for so long it's, you've been allowed to do. I mean, just simple things that like as an adult, you're like, well, that's crazy.
Right.
So
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a disservice to our kids for sure. And, but yet it keeps happening.
Yep. And I would think, John, in a sport like yours, where even though you're trying to contribute to a team score, but everything is very much individually based, if you don't perform, there's no one else to blame but you. You got to look in the mirror and say, how do I get better?
Yeah, that's one of the great things about track and field or swimming or wrestling. And you can't blame anybody but yourself, and I think that becomes very obvious when you get to college. When you compete against, like, track and field is one of those sports where it doesn't matter if you're Division 1, 2, or 3, because there are absolute killers in every division. Because it's man versus man or woman versus woman,
right.
It's highly competitive at every single meet. We tell kids all the time, if the state meet was the biggest meet you've ever been to, there won't be a meet in college that you go to that is worse than the state meet. Like the state meet is going to be the lowest level from this point on that you see. Like that's it.
That's your litmus.
So you need to step right. That's your gatekeeping door right there. Like that's the bottom level. Every meet you go to is going to be much more difficult and much more competitive than the state championships in Connecticut. Yeah.
Let me ask you a quick question back to the recruiting process, John. We've had this debate with a lot of coaches that have come on the program before, and by and large, almost all of them have uniformed to agree with us. We're sort of anti the recruiting services. Do you use them, or is it something that comes across your desk?
No.
What's that?
No. We have to use a recruiting service at Southern. We use ACS or whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah. We don't use it at all.
Can you be clearer about that?
Recruiting service. Yeah. We do not use any recruiting service when it comes to recruiting at all.
Right. Thank you.
I do not think that, they're not helpful in any way. Because again, it comes back to like a kid's numbers, it tells you a very small portion of like how successful this kid may or may not be in college. And it comes back to like, the recruiting service is really just trying to make money off these kids and these parents. And they're not necessarily trying to provide the greatest, service in the world. I mean, it costs, it's almost, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I feel like everybody's trying to make $1 off, high school kids and their parents, not even the kids, but off their parents.
Right.
And it's not good.
Right.
I mean, I don't think any of our kids that we have on our team went through a recruiting service at all.
John, if you were to spend any money on the recruiting process, if you were a parent and you said, okay, listen, I really want to show my son or daughter performances the best possible way, how would you suggest that you would do it? Would video still be the best way? Get a videographer or something like that?
Yeah, you know what? A parent taking a video from the stands of their kid competing, putting it on YouTube, and then sending you the link to the YouTube video works just as well, and it costs you nothing.
Right.
Just putting in the effort.
Right. It's just taking a video that you would take anyway for your own personal, video files, for like, 20 years down the road, you want to show people, this is what you did when you were 15 years old or whatever. I mean, it's the same thing. You just take a video of your kid, put it on YouTube, create an account on YouTube, and then you find the schools that you're interested in. Do your research, right? Research the schools that you're interested in, the ones that have the correct major for what you think you want to do, the type of program you're looking for. Are they successful? Not successful? I mean, you'd be shocked at how many kids do not have any clue how good your team is or is not.
Right.
They have no clue.
Right.
Like, you have the internet in your hands every second of the day with that phone, and you can't Google Southern Connecticut, or you can't Google, like Yale University, soccer. I mean, you can't Google a sports team and find out how good they are or are not.
That's not fun.
That's crazy.
I could tell you a story, John. In my club coaching, I always ask the players to bring me a list of schools that they're looking at, and I'll help them as much as I can, with my background in college coaching.
Right.
you would be surprised at how many kids miss the mark badly at where they think they could play because they just have never investigated it.
Absolutely. They'll investigate so many different things that are irrelevant in their life. Completely irrelevant in their life. They're going to investigate, what somebody, like some famous actor's real name or something, you know what I mean? But they won't look up, we'll say Southern Connecticut track and field, then look at the conference and look at the teams we compete against, look at the performances. It's on the internet. I mean, college athletics is it's so out there that you can't make a mistake without people knowing about it.
Right.
But yet people still don't know. In track and field, we have this website called TFRS. It's an acronym for Track and Field Real Results Service. Basically, if you compete in any meet in college, your results, everything about that meet goes up on the website underneath your name. So if you want to know how fast someone is, how good they are, how they've progressed over the last 4 years or digress, it is on the internet on this simple website that every college coach uses, and you have to, or it doesn't count. Wow. And no high school kid even knows that this thing exists. Every time we talk to a high school kid, it's like, what is that website again? I send them the link, and they're like, oh my gosh. And it's like, yeah, why don't you look up all these other schools you're looking at and then compare them to Southern Connecticut, and then you'll at least have an educated idea of what you should maybe want to do. How good is this team? Is it somewhere you can compete at? Is it somewhere you want to compete at? Are they good? Are they not good? Do the kids get better there? Do they get worse there? All that information is readily available, right on their hands, on their phone. Nobody wants to take the time to do that. It's
Mark.
crazy.
Go ahead, Mark.
All right, so John, this question probably, if we were doing this 7 years ago, wouldn't exist. Can you tell us social media and the effects on the recruiting process?
Yeah, sometimes when, especially if it's a scholarship kid, we'll do a little bit more digging, on Google and stuff like that. So I can tell you, we will look at social media accounts if we can get on there and see what these kids are saying and what they're doing and what their attitude is like. And that can greatly affect, whether we're really going to offer them any kind of scholarship or not, and so it can really negatively impact, how they're recruited. Just like if you were at a job and you said something negative about someone, or you made a political statement about something, you could get fired, right?
Sure.
I mean, and it's the same thing in recruiting. So when we have a kid that we're going to invest a lot into, we absolutely will check social media and see what this kid's really all about, and sometimes it's like, oh boy, what are we getting ourselves into? For the most part, a lot of the kids that we do recruit are pretty darn good, but every now and then you come across a kid, you're like, oh boy, what is this?
Have you personally had a situation where you were close to recruiting a kid and that might have tipped the scales?
What's funny is actually no. To answer that question, no. But we have recruited a couple kids that we had offered money to, and they decided to go somewhere else. And we kept kind of investigating them, and we found that we were really pretty glad that they didn't come to Southern, because they eventually had said some stuff negative about their high school coach, or about, certain political stances on things that just stuff that really shouldn't be said on social media.
Right.
And so we have always found that if they make the decision not to come to Southern, it's usually for the right reasons. We never really offer as much money as anybody else because we just don't have it. And so a lot of times kids will make decisions based on finances, which is the right decision for them. If that's what's motivating you, then please don't come here, because you will not fit in.
Right.
And so, every now and then you get a kid like that and you check them out and it's like, boy, this kid's not exactly what we thought they were.
Well, hey, John, you touched upon this earlier, but is the recruiting strategy at Southern, are you finding it any different than when you were at Adams or Dartmouth?
Yeah, I mean, Dartmouth College is its own, separate recruiting strategy. I mean, they have to have very specific, we'll call it an academic index. They have to have a very high academic index. They have to be a certain level of athlete. Just to even have them have the opportunity to be accepted into school.
Sure.
So that's completely different than what we deal with at Southern or at Adams State. And then at Adams State, I mean, they're, not to say anything negative about Adams, but their academic standards are a little lower than Southern's. So you could get kids in there that maybe wouldn't be accepted into Southern. Mm-hmm. Plus they have really good, they have good financial aid and they have really good, scholarship opportunities. So it was much easier at Adams State in that regard. Whereas at Southern, we really have to be very selective because, our financial aid, the state of Connecticut's having a hard time right now financially, especially with higher education. So financial aid is, for every school in Connecticut, is not the greatest. So, we have to really be patient with a lot of kids, and be diligent, like making sure that they get their paperwork in on time so that they have the best opportunity to get good financial aid. And then we do recruit a lot more later in the season. We'll say like June, July, August. We recruit a lot more then than we do during the regular part of the season, just because a lot of kids will use Southern Connecticut as like their backup choice.
Right.
And later in the season, they realize, okay, well, this actually is my best opportunity. So we'll say like, we keep them on the phone, we keep calling them and talking to them. And then by, June and July, when their season's over and they realize they're not getting the big scholarship from the big school like S.C.S.U that they thought they were, their next best option is Southern Connecticut, which it works out for us sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, it's a lot different in Southern Connecticut than say Adams State or especially Dartmouth College. There's no comparison with Dartmouth College, either of those schools, but it is a lot different than Adams State College.
Got it. Chris.
John, you spoke a great deal about parents and what you think their impact is. What would be your advice for them in the recruiting process?
Honestly, just to stay out of it.
Yep.
Like when we're recruiting, the athlete, we really just want to talk to the student athlete. I don't want to talk to the dad. I don't want to talk to the mom. When they come on a visit, I will love to talk to the parents. Mm-hmm. Like when they bring their kid up onto campus, and if they have questions for me, let's talk about it. That'd be great. But when I call the student athlete, I just want to talk to the student athlete. We're really recruiting them. We're not necessarily recruiting the parents. And I want to know if this kid is the type of kid that's going to pay attention in a phone call, have his or her own questions. Like I want to get to know the kid. I don't really want a mom or a dad hanging over the kid's phone while the kid's talking to me, putting in their 2 cents. Like I really just want to talk to the kid. And if the father or the mother has concerns, that's fine. They can call me separately. But to be honest with you, the best thing to do is to stay out of it. Let the kid go their own way. Give them advice when they ask you for advice, but just stay out of the recruiting process.
Have you seen in the course of your career the parent who acts as the student athlete's agent of sorts and does most of the talking?
Oh gosh, absolutely. I've seen that. I've seen it a lot. We're actually dealing with it right now, and it's funny because really you're just hurting the athlete. You're not helping your son or your daughter. You're just hurting their situation. You're almost turning the coach off, by trying to be, an agent or maybe a helicopter parent with this. You're really drawing major red flags to your son or your daughter by doing that. The best thing you can do, in my opinion, is just to let your kid handle the situation on their own, and then, just be able to communicate with adults without you standing over them.
Sure. Well, so far, John, you've answered the easy questions. We are now going to put you onto the hot seat, okay? Many
good.
Coaches have folded under this line of questioning, so you may need a towel, some Gatorade, perhaps even an oxygen mask of some sort, because it's going to get tough for you now. You spoke about getting to know recruits. Well, we're going to spend some time with Mark's questions getting to know you.
I'm just going to clear my throat quick so I can sing this at the right pitch.
Getting to know you, getting to know
Beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful.
Getting to like
You sound great, Mark.
Thank you.
Beautiful voice.
Okay, John, if we were to search your phone, what would be the top 3 played songs or artists?
Well, for sure, the top artist would be Chevelle. I probably listen to them on a daily basis. But, yeah, Chevelle, it's a group.
Nice. Not the car.
No,
obviously.
no. Although I love the car. And then, after that, it's a combination of like, I actually had a bunch of that were like in my top 25, but like the National, Radiohead, Pearl Jam, and
Sure.
Perfect Circle. Those kind of just cycle through every now and then depending on my mood.
Yeah.
Excellent. Next, who's the most famous person you have in your contact list?
Well, what's interesting about that is because I'm a track coach, the most famous people I have on my phone are like Adam Nelson, who was a 2004 Olympic Games gold medalist in the shot put, and Vin Lanana, who was the 2016 Olympic head coach. These are two guys that I know really well, which nobody outside of our sport would really have to. But in the track and field world, I mean, Vin Lanana is like the godfather of track and field in the United States. He runs the entire U.S. track and field circuit. I mean, he is the guy. And then obviously Adam Nelson is Olympic gold medalist. So, but outside of our sport, you wouldn't know.
So hopefully whoever's, when they listen, they'll be Googling these guys.
Yeah.
Okay, John, how about a favorite quote or quotes?
I do. I do have a favorite quote. I would say Charles Bukowski is like a poet / like, I don't know, like philosopher. Not really. He's a guy that I really like a lot of his stuff. And so one of his better quotes is, "What matters most is how you walk through the fire." And I believe that like it really does matter, like how you go through the struggles in this world. Because everybody's got them. And I think a lot of people just think that, oh, I'm the only one that has problems going on, or I'm the only one that has this. I get this a lot. It's like, well, like what's going on with your academics, or what's going on, how come you're struggling these last couple of weeks, whether it be in sport or in school? And kids always tell me, well, I'm having a lot of problems at home. I'm like, well, okay. I think we all have problems from time to time. Whether it be somebody's sick, or God forbid, a family member passes, or,
sure,
or just arguing or whatever it is. Like, it's not, I don't think life is about what happens to you. This is another quote, but it's how you deal with what happens to you. It's what matters most is how you walk through the hard times, through the fire, and a lot of people, I think, struggle with that concept. It's the excuse. There's always an excuse. Well, I'm having a hard time at home, or I'm feeling a little sick. Well, that's fine, but you still need to follow through with all the things that you have in your life. You can't just not go to class. You can't just not show up to practice. You can't just not compete. You can't just not try.
Sure.
Because you're struggling.
Right.
And so those are the biggest points, I think, as coaches, with our department like that, I think we're all trying to make with our student athletes. It's like, don't make excuses. Find a way to have success despite what's happening to you. Right. I think every successful person can tell you that they've had a really hard time at some point, and they found a way to just walk through the fire and get all the way through to the other side.
It's awesome.
Well said. Next, who's been the biggest influence in your life?
My father. For better or for worse, there's been times where we've had good relationships and not good relationships. We're both very competitive. We're both, I would say, alpha males. And so, my mother's probably spent a majority of her life breaking up fist fights between the two of us. But he's always provided me with, like, the best example of how I think, like a man should walk the walk. He's the most resilient son of a gun, the most determined and stubborn guy I've ever met. And I think, that has helped me understand, like, it doesn't matter if you're sick. You get up and you do what you're supposed to do. That's where this all comes from. Is my father never spent a day lying in bed because he was sick, or, he's been a great influence.
Excellent.
Awesome.
In a lot of ways.
Can you give the listeners a little known fact about yourself?
I am absolutely terrified of sharks and heights.
Okay.
I spent an entire summer trying to break my fear of heights. I pole vaulted and like that never bothered me, but like just being on, a second story, just just makes me shiver. And then obviously the idea of sharks, I don't want to be anywhere near them. I'm not trying to break that fear, but the idea of sharks is awful. Like any movie that comes out about sharks and the trailer comes on, I'm out of there.
Yeah, there's like a new one out there too now. I just saw.
Oh my God, yeah, I know, my 47 meters or something like that.
Yeah,
I don't want
right.
anything to do with that. I don't want to see it. I don't want to know that sharks exist. That is horrifying to me.
Well, I share your fear with the height thing. Is your height thing like? Are you okay in a plane?
Yeah, as long as I don't have to look down or feel like I feel confident in a plane.
Yeah,
you know, if it starts to shake, I'll get a little nervous. But you know, I don't. It's more like, you know, standing on like a ledge. You know,
right.
I grew up in New Hampshire, and so there's a lot of train trestles. You know, where like you have where like train tracks go over a river, and you know they're 20 feet in the air, some are 80 feet in the air, and so I try to rid myself, you know, break myself of this fear. It never got easier.
Right.
I mean, I tried to go off the same bridge like 30 times, and every time I got to the edge, I was like struck with like, you know,
you'd freeze. Yeah.
Oh my God, do I freeze? Like it's so horrible.
That's actually not funny.
Yeah, it sucks.
Next, if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would you choose?
Bill Belichick. I would love to sit down and just ask him questions about different things. If I could sit down with him and have him be as like open and as candid as like he could be, that would be great. You know, I wouldn't want to, you know, win a contest, sit down with him and have him be like tight-lipped the whole time and not really talk.
Yeah.
I would love to have dinner with Bill Belichick.
That'd probably be a good dinner.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if he could be open.
Right, true. If you weren't coaching college track and field, what do you think you would be doing, John?
This is a tough one. You know, it's funny. I kind of rolled this around in my head for quite a while, thinking about this question. I would be lifting weights on Muscle Beach.
That's hysterical.
Every day.
That's the best answer we've ever had to that question. 100%.
That could be the best one. I just I don't know if you've seen this. This reminds me of I saw a video on YouTube of a guy who competes, I guess, but he's a young guy, but put on like a really great costume of an old man.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
I have.
And he goes in and he does all these crazy
lifts.
Oh my God, he's awesome. Doing deadlifts and squat. It's insane.
Yeah, he goes in and I mean he's a really strong guy. And he's got this,
clearly
he looks like he's like 80 years old.
Right.
And he starts out with like a warm up of like 200 pounds in the snatch. You know, and like everybody around him is like, hey, what are you doing, old guy? You did that hurt. Like,
Take it easy there, old man.
Yeah. They did the same thing with Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and like I forget where he was, but they put on an old costume and he went out and started doing soccer tricks, and it was it's
awesome.
Not only is he impressive, holy cow, is that guy athletic?
Yeah.
But like those kind of things are really funny to watch.
Oh, it's hysterical.
It really blows people's minds.
Yeah. Question number 8. What is the one thing you believe that others might think is crazy?
I don't know.
This is the toughest one.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, I don't know. I don't know what I believe that others might think is crazy.
Maybe it's everything.
That's a tough one. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think, to be honest with you, I think most people that I associate with believe the same things I do, for the most part. You know, it's the people that I don't spend a lot of time talking to or don't even know that probably think completely opposite of me.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know, like you know, having a conversation with you two, I guarantee like 95% of what we would talk about or what we believe in is probably pretty similar. Mm-hmm. Similar to like the people that are going to listen to this podcast are probably along the same lines in most areas. You know, political views aside, like I think,
right.
You know, we all probably believe somewhat along the same lines, but then it's the people that I probably have never met or don't know, and they probably think half the stuff I think is crazy. Like, I believe if you want to lose weight, it's all nutritionally based. Mm-hmm. It's all nutritionally based. And I guarantee you, they're like, when I go to shop, like, you know, say if I'm out grocery shopping with my family, there are people I look at what they buy and I'm like, holy cow. Like, I know that we do not come, like, we definitely do not believe the same things.
Right.
And so, that's the hardest question for sure.
Right.
But that's the best example I could come up with.
That's fine. It's perfect. Lastly, do you have any web-based sites or tools that you rely on or enjoy using, either for work or personal use?
Yeah, Huddle Technique is kind of like, I'm trying to think of what the old one was called, like Eagle Eye or something like that.
Coach's Eye or Eagle Eye. Yeah.
Coach's Eye, right. Yeah. That's probably the one that I use the most for, for work. It does a good job of, being able to slow-mo things down, high-quality camera, this, that, and the other thing.
Sure.
So I use that a lot, Huddle Technique. I think it's changed its name 3 or 4 times. It's like I open up my phone and it's now got a different name.
Rebranding.
And then Instagram. I use Instagram a lot.
Yep.
There's actually a lot of Instagram accounts like, Jumpers World, the Throwers World, like all these different ones that basically will keep me up to date with what's going on in the world of like the jumps or the sprints, and track and field. And so like I follow a lot of track and field people on Instagram. That's actually pretty darn useful, not only for personal use, but for work as well.
Excellent.
Well, tell you what, John, you skated right through this. Obviously the track and field background has helped you sprint right through the getting to know you section. With the greatest of ease, you came in first, and there will now be medals for you as well.
Yeah, we do have a ribbon at the end of this.
Yeah, there's a ribbon. So you could wipe the sweat off your brow right now. And
thank goodness.
My final question to you is: could you explain to listeners or a potential prospective student athlete what a day in the life of a Southern Connecticut track and field athlete would be like?
Yeah, if you're a distance runner, it starts at 6 a.m. And you got to be here for a morning run, and then you got to you go eat, you go to class. And you come back for an afternoon practice, and then more than likely you're going to go to a study table at night. If not study table, you're going to go to the library just to get your studying done, and hopefully you're in bed by midnight. It's a long day. But like I said, if you're going to do college athletics, you really want to be prepared for what it really entails, which is getting up early a lot of times to work out, going to class. I don't care how tired you are, you still got to go to class,
right?
And then you got to come back and go to practice again. You got weights, and it's probably not any different for, say a sport like football where you got film study and then you got, actual practice plus you got lifting. So, your day is really, really pretty organized, and it's chock full of all sorts of activities, whether it be athletic or academic. Because a lot of kids don't take into account the mandatory study halls that we have, right. Which is essential. When kids are tired and you give them free time, oh boy, they can get into all sorts of trouble. So, I would say most days are, they're a good, 16-hour day,
yep.
Which doesn't leave you much time for dilly-dally, if you want to get 8 hours of sleep.
And from your standpoint, you have some high-level events that you attend and meets that you attend. Where would your travel take you?
Well, this last year, we went to Alabama once. We went to Florida twice, and South Carolina once, and then a couple trips to New Jersey. Yeah. So we went all over the East Coast, as far south as Florida, and obviously as far north as Massachusetts. So quite a bit of traveling means a lot of accountability for a student athlete. You have to go and talk to your professors well in advance and make sure any kind of homework or tests that are going to come up on the days that we're gone, you need to take that in advance.
Right. Mark.
So again, comes back to that accountability, like kids just understanding that you are responsible now for your athletics and your academics, and to miss a test and say, well, I was gone at a track meet, that's not going to cut it.
Yeah, right.
It just doesn't work that way. Your professor's going to be like, well, I'm sorry, son, or, you failed.
Yeah.
You have to take care of it ahead of time. And I tell you, we go over that time and time again with kids.
Mark.
Hey, John, as we wind up here, before we head out, to any final thoughts or parting words that you want to give the listeners?
Yeah, I would say, just final thoughts and advice for life is to make sure you do what you love. Don't do anything for money. Do it because you love to do it, because that's what always is going to keep you excited and motivated in life. Money is not really a great motivator for most people. If you love a sport, you should do it in college, and make sure you go all the way with it. Follow through with every aspect of it, and go as far as you can with it. Follow what you love.
Excellent, good advice.
Definitely.
And do you have anything that you wish to promote today? Any kind of camps going on?
We don't really do too many camps at Southern.
Okay.
So the only thing I would promote is just Southern athletics in general. I would tell you, it's an honor to be able to compete in college, but it's even better if you're going to do it at Southern Connecticut. So no matter what sport it is, this is a great place to do a college sport.
Agreed. Totally
Excellent.
agree. And
John, lastly, how can the listeners get in touch with you?
Email is always the best. It's wallinj2@southernct.edu. And I pretty much respond to everything.
Excellent. I'll make sure that all of this goes up in the show notes for those that listen. They can access this information. And just remember, folks, before we head out here, if you want to contact us on the web, it's tacklingcollegesports.com. Email is tacklingcollegesports@gmail.com. On Facebook, facebook.com/tacklingcollegesports, Twitter @tacklingcollege, and Instagram tacklingcollege. And until next time, be your best.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Chris. Really
Thanks so much. Appreciate it, John.
All right.
Be your best.
Bye.
Your college sports future awaits. So join the TCS Nation and be your best.